Good evening, everyone. As you can see, we'll be rocking and rolling here in just a moment. Let me clear last week's audio off the thing before I even get started, so that way I'm starting off with a nice, fresh SD card. I meant to actually do that before I started the show, and guess what? Who has two thumbs and is always forgetting to do stuff? This guy. All right. Let me start the recording, and we'll proceed with the Liberty Talk.
In the restaurant of life, we're putting freedom back on the menu. It's the Missouri Liberty Report with John Williams, working with grassroots organizations and legislatures to make Missouri the freest state in the nation. Let freedom ring.
All right, folks, and we are back with another edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. Thanks so much for joining us again this week. Greatly appreciate it. And as always in the live stream, Voodoo Queen is first one in. Voodoo Queen, we start calling her Voodoo Clock Queen because it's like clockwork. Every week she's in the live chat. All right, folks, we got a lot of stuff to cover in these 2 hours, and I just want to start off. I specially recorded this into my board for this week's show because after looking at everything from the hurricane and how FEMA is treating people about not letting certain people come in to hand out goodies to the people who desperately need it, they're like, okay, Brandon, you probably know what I'm talking about, and the nerds of the world will know. The non-nerds will not know probably what I'm talking about. But there is a little quote from the Fellowship of the Ring movie. Gandalf the Grey is standing on a ledge, and there's this huge Balrog coming at him, and there's a very famous little quote. What is it? 4 words that he yells out at the Balrog before he strikes his staff in the thing and breaks it down. I believe FEMA could be considered the bad Gandalf, and this is exactly what they're going to say to you when you show up with, water, food, bedding, anything, clothing for these people.
You shall not pass!
You shall not pass. That's what they're going to do. I don't know why that came into my brain, Brandon, but I was like, I'm going to record that to my board and have it on ready, and we'll just call him Bad Gandalf. But anyway, we got, like I said, folks, we got a lot of stuff to cover. We've got that. We've got the whole thing with Israel and Lebanon and now Iran, and the war machine is cranking up and ratcheting up. And these things kind of tie together, as we'll show you through the show, because we have a lot of people here in the U.S. that need help right now, and it seems like the federal government, I don't know, Brandon, looks like they're more worried about possibly sending troops to Israel to help them out rather than not that I think the government should be I don't think FEMA should exist, really, because they're horrific. But if we have to have FEMA and all these things, it's clear who the priority is. Wouldn't you agree, Brandon? It looks like the Israelis are more important than the U.S. people. Yeah. Yeah. What I mean, there's so much to talk about this, but it's like, I talking to people at work today, and I'm like, okay, I don't think I could. I mean, we've had so many reasons over the past 20 years or so to look at agencies like FEMA and go, I don't think they give a crap about me anymore. I think the government has lost all interest in protecting its people and maybe what's doing in their best interest. Here's another. I don't know how many more reasons we have to give or to see before people go, I really don't think they care. Tom Woods sent out an interesting email for his email. If you're on his email list, you would have got that today. And if you haven't joined Tom Wood's email list, I suggest you do, because he's always got some dandy emails. But he said FEMA's turning more Americans into America First type people, which I hope is true. I hope that is true. I hope people see this, just like the Maui thing. We're going to give you breadcrumbs, but we're going to send billions of dollars to fight 2 proxy wars overseas. I don't know. I don't know, Brandon. I don't know how many more examples that people need to see before they figure out the feds have no vested interest in what is good and necessary for the people. Oh. His own stuff. Yeah.
People who need it, and they're just letting him, they're just giving him a free pass on this. It's not, I'm not shocked. Like, we found out it was supposedly breaking news from not Veritas, James O'Keefe, who used to run Project Veritas but then left and now has his own thing. But he sent an undercover journalist to talk to an MSNBC person, and they admitted that, yeah, we are basically a surrogate of the Harris campaign, and yeah, we are in line with the Democratic Party. But we already knew that. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm not shocked. It's nothing new that the media is covering up for Joe Biden, but it's abhorrent because 200 Americans are dead and people are still without basic necessities. And they're just letting him, they're just giving him a free pass. It's very annoying.
And therein lies, another, it's hard to call it a silver lining, but it is just another example of not only your government seems to care, could care less about you, but it also seems the media who loves to tell you that they're coming out with all these truths and facts and telling you everything you know to keep you up to date on the latest news. Does the media care about the people? No, they don't care about real journalism. And they don't care about the people who turn on their channel. The only thing they care about is their advertisers and, as you stated, being an arm of the government machine. That's the only two things. Advertiser dollars and sucking up to elitists and then leaving the people out in the cold. And it's, again, I don't know how many more times this stuff has to happen. And I mean, it is literally, if you get on the internet, you get on YouTube, you get on Rumble, you get on TikTok, you get on X, you get on Facebook. It's not like the media is the only place that you can go. The internet is filled with these stories. Helicopter pilots being threatened of being arrested for going out and trying to save people up on a mountain, or people being turned away with all these things to pass out to the people who have been affected by this tragedy. It's everywhere.
Also,
how can you ignore it?
You can effectively fly drones and search for people. Like, you could launch drones, those little drones, they fly miles and miles. You could scour so much more land if you had private citizens all with their little drones. They're not, I mean, everybody knows someone who has a couple, and you just fly them over top, and you could cover way more ground than government-sanctioned helicopters flying around looking for people would be. I mean, you can fly them so much lower to the ground. You have so much more maneuverability. You could send them out. You could send out hundreds at a time, and you could locate people really fast. And then, let alone letting in private helicopters in to go get these people. I will sit and complain about taxes, no matter how much it is. That's just in my nature, is to complain about taxes. But for the people who don't naturally complain about taxes, you should feel very betrayed by this. Because if you pay your taxes and you pay it because you believe that it's, for the safety net of society, then you should feel like this should be the clearest example of the government is like, the last thing you want to hear is, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
Yeah, those are awful, excruciating words to hear. Yeah, that is you're dead on. I mean, people, we get that line. Taxes are the price you pay to live in a civilized society. Well, leaving I'm seeing these videos again. I haven't deep dove into these things, but I'm hearing about it from a lot of people that there are places where there's just dead bodies laying out, and they're not cleaning them up. And the people are like, "Can we do something here?" And then like Asheville and some other places, the media's there looking at that, but there's communities all around there that also are devastated. No media, no nothing. The media coverage, if there is any, is very selective. And I'm sure it could be that there's more liberals in that town than, I don't put anything past the media, and I don't put anything past the government. I wanted to play this video, but I have to sit here and keep hitting the mute button, and I'm afraid I'm going to miss, and then I got to go back and dig through the audio file. But I played this a video for Brandon or before we started the show, and it's just this guy on TikTok, and he's like, I want to feel sorry for these people, but when you hear that they had warnings and they were told to evacuate by the federal and local, the state and local governments, and they didn't, the only thing I feel sorry for is the dogs. And it's like the people that didn't leave were Republicans. They don't trust their government. And I'm like, well, they probably have good. I'm kind of with them on that. I don't trust the government either. Now, I think he might have been talking about a certain area, and there's so many people that had reactions to that video, like, hey, Jack Wagon, if you live in the mountains, you have one road. And some of these people are so poor they don't even have vehicles. See, that's the other thing some people don't discuss is you get into areas that have a lot of hurricanes or whatever. There's public transportation that gets them out of the city. Some of these places literally have public transit that will get them out. You get up in the mountainous areas, they don't have any of that stuff. And I don't think they were planning on the dams breaking and I don't know how many inches of rain. In fact, a guy at work is originally from he grew up in Kentucky. He moved to Missouri. It's been a few decades ago he moved to Missouri. But somebody he knows down around a certain area, they got hit really hard. Now, there were people working at this factory, and they wanted to leave. And they're like, if you leave, you're fired. Well, here comes the water, and it's thigh deep. And apparently a tractor trailer from this truck driver from Texas, I don't know if he dropped something off. He was getting ready to leave, and they're like, hey, can we put these people on your tractor trailer, on your bed and get them out of here? And he's like, yeah, that's cool. And they're starting to leave, and something hits the trailer, knocks it over, and half the people died. Like 5 out of 11 perished. And and the guy that was telling me about it, he's angry. It's making me angry just hearing this. And I'm thinking, this sounds bad, but this is why sometimes people unionize. If they hear stuff like this, not that this happens all the time, and there are people like, well, they had a choice, they could have left. Like, yeah, maybe so. But there is a thing called human decency. If you know what's going on around you, and it could potentially become very dangerous, the human decent thing to do would be to go, we should let these people leave now. Like before the water was even close to, if the water's getting closer to the building, I would think, I don't want people coming in today. Let them get out of Dodge. No, if you leave, you're fired. I would have been fired. I would have been like, I am sticking around here. I'm not risking my life for you. But yeah, it's crazy the amount of stories that are coming out about this.
Yeah, no. I heard about one story. I ended up finding it. So if you go on X or Twitter and you go to the account, the handle's called Wall Street Apes. There's a story, and there's a video about people in Asheville, North Carolina. So their business had flooded. And they were trying to go back into their business to get their stuff out because they were afraid that like looters and junkies were going to come in and steal their stuff. And the police threatened to arrest them if they go back into their own business to get their own stuff to make another trip out. That's craziness. You know, that the part of that scares me the most is that, like, one of my few libertarian weak points would be law enforcement. I don't have that, I don't have a super stringent beef against local law enforcement, but it's situations like that where they're just like, man, I'm just following orders. Yeah, like yeah. And so it makes you weary of local law enforcement in that sense. You can't trust them because you're right. It wasn't probably Asheville, North Carolina's sheriff's office making that decision, but you enforced it. What would make me feel a lot better is if that call came down from the mayor and the sheriff's office was like, we're never doing that. Like, we're never going to arrest somebody for going into their own business ever. Forget about it. But no, of course, what do? They curtail right to the government will, and I'm just following orders. They're telling me I come straight from the top. Like, I hate that kind of logic, and it's like you said, it just makes you not trust. Like I said, it makes me not trust law enforcement.
Well, and the thing is those sheriffs should know that they are the highest ranking. So even if FEMA comes in and they start throwing their weight around, the sheriffs can go, yeah, there's a county line. You can go on the other side of it, or we will arrest every single one of you. I mean, they have that authority. They are the highest ranking law enforcement agency in any area, is your sheriff. So the feds could come into, like, let's say the feds came into Owensville. You had a little group of ATF or whatever come in, and the sheriff's like, I don't like this, and he can show up and go, out now. And they have to leave. He can allow them to leave. If they don't leave, he can go, all right, well, we're going to put bracelets on all of you and take you to the county jail. You have two choices. Get out or get arrested. And
no,
I wish
that can't be true.
It is
really?
true. Yes.
No.
Yes, your sheriff's department is the highest ranking law enforcement in your area. I have heard of sheriffs telling feds, bye.
Oh, well, then that's
what I'm saying.
Fantastic news.
Yeah.
The fact that that's not exploited more on a daily basis is beyond me.
That is what is the worst part of this. Like, and I'll give you another example too. I interviewed a sheriff from Arizona, a few years ago. This was during the COVID thing. And thank you. Voodoo Queen says the Chimney Rock story is not about the bodies is not true. There were no bodies. It was a horse that passed. Thank you for that. Like I said, I've been hearing all these stories. I wish I could remember the name of the sheriff. But he flat out told the state, he told county officials, I will not enforce anything you do. And in fact, he wrote up like things for his sheriff saying, I will not mandate that you take the vaccine. I won't do this. I won't do that. And counties around him were like, hey, can we get a copy of that? So he was sending copies to other counties. And like, here you go. I wrote it up. Just change it to your county name and sign your name to it. So yeah, they have the most, they are the highest ranking law enforcement in your area, which is outstanding because that gives you autonomy and it also gives you like a buffer. But again, Missouri does not have constitutional sheriffs, and I don't know what the difference is between a normal sheriff's department and a constitutional sheriff, or those titles. Every state should have constitutional sheriffs. But if a sheriff knows his constitution and knows where his, how much authority he has, then he can exercise that authority and go, you're not welcome here. I've talked to, there was a cop that was in a town 10 minutes from me. And I guess this guy had, a narcotics group showed up and they were going to go in this guy's house and bust him. And he's like, dude, there was like big black SUVs. He's like, 2 or 3. He's like, there's a dozen or more of these guys standing outside. And he goes, I showed up and I called all the people that were on duty and reserve and said, get here now. And he looked at him and said, you can stand outside and I will go in and I'll bring this guy out. But he's like, as far as I'm concerned, get in your SUVs and go. Because if you don't, I'll have you arrested. And he's like, guy lived in a little bitty place. He's like, you couldn't even fit all those guys in the place. He's like, what are all 12 or 15 of you going to do inside there? You're going to, you're going to escalate things where I can just walk in there, talk to him, and ask him to walk outside and make this much more peaceful. So he's like, you'll stand out here or you can leave, but you're not going in his house. And they didn't. He walked in. He got the guy to walk out and got the whole thing done. But you just don't hear many stories about that. Now, when the Fed started getting real stupid with gun laws, I saw videos of sheriffs and counties around the country, along the East Coast, the Midwest, standing in front of like county board meetings saying, hey, I don't care what the feds say. I will not enforce these gun laws. I will not. You can fire me, but I'm not doing it. I'm telling you right now, the Second Amendment means shall not be infringed, and I will not infringe on anyone's natural rights of self-defense. He's like, the Constitution that I swore an oath to states it. It is the rule book I'm supposed to follow, so I'm not enforcing these bad laws. And so there have been, but yeah, in this instance, I believe the sheriffs could tell FEMA to go take a rolling or a flying screw through a rolling donut, and they're going. That sheriff's department's going to get bad press because the media is going to stick up for the feds, of course.
Oh, absolutely.
But
just in theory, if a libertarian had every sheriff's department in the country, theoretically they could just not. I mean, there's basically they could just nullify all unconstitutional laws in a sense. I mean, obviously it's never going to happen, but like in theory, that could be done.
Yes, they could refuse.
That's interesting to think about.
Yeah, they can refuse. And I think, honestly, if a city police department, I know there were some city, like either city marshals or chiefs of police that were saying certain things about gun laws, like, hey, we're not doing this. That's the thing. Some people in law enforcement, whether it's sheriff's department, city police, I think, especially if the law or regulation or rule or whatever that the city or the county or the state's trying to enforce, I believe if law enforcement officials said, I'm not enforcing that violates the Constitution, I believe they have that right. I just wish more of them to do it. I wish some of these towns, like I'm so happy that I live in Owensville, especially with the current city marshal that we have now, because he's not looking at generating revenue. We got to write so many tickets. So there were complaints. The thefts were up, and people were just blowing through. They were going way over the speed limit in certain areas. What he did? All he did was he put officers. He upped the patrols, and then he parked them. And I witnessed this a month ago. I was going to work, and there was a cop on the side of the road, and there was somebody clearly doing, probably 10 over the speed limit coming up the hill, and he flipped his lights on and flipped them right back off, like, slow down. That's all he did. He didn't whip out, pull them over. So he's just upping the enforcement and putting, having them sit there, but not necessarily writing tickets, just as a measure to get them to slow down. A lot of cities don't do that. And like I was telling you before the show, Jason Lyon, for those of you who remember him being a guest on this show from You Are the Power, he had a Facebook post that said, yeah, the roads are cleaned up and the power, we almost got power back to everybody, and the cops are already out running speed traps again. It's like, God, you're already trying. What are you trying? You lose some revenue and you're trying to make up for it now?
They can't take one day off from being unlikable. Like, just they can't take one day off to be likable guys.
It just blows my mind. It's like, I can't believe that you would even think about doing this. Like, we got to go out and make sure people aren't speeding. Like, you got a whole lot of people still recovering from the aftermath of this storm. And your first thought is, we better go out there and write some tickets. Okay. Like, at that point, just everybody go home. You guys just go home. And then all the armed citizens will be on the lookout for criminals. And then we'll just shoot them and dig a hole and put them in there and mark the grave if they have ID on them. Then that way you can say, oh, yeah, this guy was trying to break in and they shot him and dug a hole and they buried him. And We'll just mark that down in a book, and then when it's all said and done, we'll give the state the list of people that we shot for, being violent and pillaging and looting and everything else. But yeah, I don't know. It's there's and I remember back when Katrina hit down there in New Orleans, and they were going door to door confiscating people's guns, and this lady in her 60s getting tackled to the ground after she's like, yeah, I have a gun back there. And they knocked her to the ground. Now, they used National Guards members to do that. But yeah, they went door to door. For the younger people in the audience that may not know this, they went door to door confiscating people's guns. And there was a lot of looting and pillaging and crap going on in the aftermath. And so their first thought was, we better go take these people's guns. And let's leave them defenseless.
Well, it's classic government to exploit a crisis to take away your rights. We've seen that. That's a tale as old as time for sure. But one thing I wanted to bring up I read this. I'm sure it's true. I don't have facts to back this up, but I'm sure it's true. So apparently FEMA has designated preferred vendors.
I saw that.
So what'll happen is when an emergency happens, FEMA's got all of these contracts with all of these different vendors for different supplies and stuff. And the reason they won't let private citizens go in and help is because these FEMA people want to make sure they use the government money, our money, to go to their preferred vendors. So not only can the vendors overcharge for their product, but a kickback then goes to the FEMA representative who brokered the deal, basically, for all of the goods used. So, I would love to. I read an anecdote. Even the person that I read this story from didn't have concrete evidence or anything like that. So if anybody in the live chat or anybody knows of any concrete evidence of this blatant FEMA corruption, please feel free to post it in the live chat. But it's true. It's just one of those stories that the second you hear it, you're like, oh, that 100% lines up. That's why they won't let private citizens go in and help their fellow private citizens. Also, it's going to make the government look bad whenever private citizens are helping 10 times more people at half the cost of the government. But the real, if you're just the layman who's just watching the show casually, then you should definitely be upset that the government is blatantly just doing a kickback deal and costing the taxpayers and the people suffering in the process.
I read that too. I did read that, where they have preferred vendors. And, again, people are like, well, I'd like proof. Here's one of those instances where you look at everything the government's done. I mean, remember the reports that came out, they were spending $10,000 on toilet seats, $500 screwdrivers, and you mean to tell me you don't think that there's even a remote possibility that FEMA would have preferred vendors? Come on. We have public-private partnerships and all kinds of things. Big corporations and government holding each other's hands, screwing over competition, and sometimes screwing the people. You don't think that there's even just a slight chance that the government and certain corporations are buddying up? And and that's and it wouldn't be so bad. But like Brandon said, the bad thing is that the entity selling the water, the blankets, whatever, they're marking up the price because, again, it's guaranteed money. The government's going to pay them, and they're gonna make good money. And that's what's funny, Brandon. Now we talk about this is the Harris team is talking about making these laws on price gouging. But then this happens, and you know for a fact the federal government's overpaying tremendously for these goods because they don't care. It's not their money. But then we have to have laws about price gouging, which we already have. And almost every state has laws on price gouging. But then they're going to protect us from these evil corporations. Meanwhile, it looks like they have preferred vendors, and they're generally probably overpaying for every freaking thing they get. So it's another one of those hypocritical things that government does.
There's another story I want to talk about in this, and just because I've heard an interesting back and forth on this. There was a gas station who was charging $10 a gallon for gas. And some people were posting it online claiming that they were exploiting the crisis by charging $10 a gallon for gas. But when they talked to the store owners, I believe I could be getting the story wrong, but I believe they talked to the store owners. And the store owners were saying that, no, we're doing that to prevent people from stockpiling it right now. We're charging $10 a gallon so people only get as much as they need and don't overstock on it. They said as soon as the supply comes back in that they're gonna lower the prices again, and that it's not done to make them a fortune for the limited amount of gas that they have. It's to make sure that 6 guys don't come in and buy it all up and start charging $15 down the street or whatever, So again, I do understand where people it does appear like it would be price gouging, especially if they knew that another truck was coming soon, or if they had like inside knowledge of more gas coming soon, then yeah, you could make the argument that they were price gouging. But if they were doing it for the reasons they said they were doing it, and it made sense to me. But again, I'm open to hearing both sides of that debate. But it made sense that, you don't want somebody taking up all the gas and then grandma can't get to her doctor's appointment or whatever's going on. I just think that's interesting.
Yeah.
If you had an opinion on it, or if you had heard that story. I believe it was a place called Pope's Convenience Store. But anyway.
I heard about it too, and it makes complete sense to me. And talking about that, when, after Katrina hit, when I was working for a pest control company, and it was like a couple few years after Katrina, and there's this private development outside of Washington, and there was just homes popping up everywhere. And there was a lady, I think I went in, I don't remember if I did a termite inspection or what I did at this house. And she goes, you see that house across the street? And it was going to look pretty similar to hers. It was the same square footage and everything. Shaped the same. She goes, that house across the street is like $60,000 more. And I was like, oh. She goes, yeah, Katrina, because of all the shortages in building materials, that house was $50,000 to $60,000 more. And that's the thing that people don't take into consideration. Just like now, after all this is said and done and all this rebuilding goes on, the price of lumber and everything's going to skyrocket because the manufacturers are going to have shortages, and their people are going to be working mass amounts of overtime to fill the need to get all these supplies to rebuild. And so it's going to go up because there's going to be shortages. I just wish people understood. And I'm no economist by any means, but just had a basic understanding of supply and demand. When the market's flooded with stuff and it's not selling, the price goes down. If there's shortages, the price goes up. That's the way the economy works. And no amount you can put price restrictions on it, and all that does is say, okay, well, we're putting so many stores out of business because they need to charge more and they can't, so they'll go bankrupt. And then you're just creating a monopoly for the big guys. But it's not solving the problem. It's just one of those feel-good issues that the government likes to come riding in on their white horse and act like they're saving us all from something.
I think they've actually taken supply and demand out of the curriculum in high schools.
Because
it seems like nobody seems to understand that is why prices rise. Either you have an influx of goods, an influx of demand, or an influx of currency. But it's never a surprise why prices go up or down for most people.
Yeah,
but man.
You're probably right, Brandon. They probably don't. It's probably like, well, these greedy corporations, they just decide to charge more. Like, really? It would be nice sometimes if things were that just cut and dry, just that simple. When economics, if it really was like, oh, well, people decided to charge more and that's it. Again, I'm not an economist by any stretch of the imagination. I have a very basic understanding. But if you have more than 2 brain cells to rub together, you should know, especially when you're talking about a product from beginning stage to end stage, and how many middlemen there are as far as suppliers and manufacturers of certain parts so they can be all put together to make this one thing. It's not cut and dry, but I don't know. It's just, and the thing is, folks, and I know we said this ties together, the people in these areas that were hit very hard, and Kamala Harris or Biden or whoever said you get $750. What are they ready to spend billions of dollars on? Two proxy wars, Ukraine and Israel.
So whenever they said they were sending $750 to the affected people, it reminded me of, I mean, not trying to whataboutism, but it's funny that you just brought up the two proxy wars, because it reminded me of when Netanyahu addressed Congress and 6 months into the genocide in Gaza says we've allowed over 3,000 calories for every man, woman, and child has gone into Gaza. And I'm like, okay, 3,000 calories. The average American, like actually the recommended amount of calories that the average person is supposed to eat in a day is like what, like 2,000? Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't trust those numbers and those doctors either, but they say that the average American is supposed to eat about 2,000 calories a day. And over 6 months, he's saying he allowed in 3,000 calories per person over 6 months. It just, I'm like, yeah. So the Kamala Harris being like, we're going to offer $750 to every man, woman, and child affected by this. I'm like, that's nothing. So what you're saying is you have nothing for them. Here's a whole bunch of nothing. Congratulations. Yeah. So, and it's funny you brought that up, and I'm really glad you brought that up, that like these people, they didn't have the money to like go to hotels. Like all of these people affected by this hurricane, it's not like everyone, not even that, even all the surrounding areas would have the space for them. But because you're talking about states of people having to evacuate. Where are they going to go? Like if everyone evacuated, every hotel in every area would be completely packed and flooded. I mean, you're talking about evacuating hospitals. I mean, wasn't there a hospital where everyone was on the roof?
Yeah.
Did you see that video?
I heard about that too. Yes.
Right. Were those people supposed to, all of those people strapped to a bed, were they supposed to get into their cars and drive out? Like, it just makes no sense.
They were just going to put like little ball hitches on them, and they were going to put like 5 gurneys in a row, and then somebody in a truck would like pull them down the highway. Real quick before you continue, the guy's last name is Kennedy. He's ex-Special Forces, and he was working with it's some kind of organizations like called Save All Allies or something like that. But they were working trying to help people out. So he's like, he goes, I got 2 vans. He goes, I got people loaded in. He goes, I drive them out of the wreckage to a hotel so we could get them rooms. And he's like, what do we hear? Federal employees. The whole hotel was booked for federal employees. So the people leaving an area trying to get a place to bed down couldn't, because federal employees had every room booked.
I mean, sure, if every single one of those federal employees is out there busting their hump trying to save people as hard as they could 24/7, then you could justify that. But they're not. They're not. Half of it's just bureaucrats. That's the part that drives me the most nuts, is how many people in suits are getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to do absolutely nothing right now. I mean, that's just with every government agency ever, of course, but it's frustrating when it's happening in the moment and people are suffering.
Absolutely.
Like, it's happening like right now. Like it's happening right now, and they're actively getting paid to do nothing. Like people should be up in arms, especially in those areas, like in those affected states. Like there should be protests in the streets.
I did see a video today too where this guy's like, I wonder what would happen if like 200,000 of us went, let's say around Asheville or wherever there's a bunch of FEMA freaks at. And they all just show up and they go, hey, guys, it's cool. Go. Bye. We got this. You can leave now. Go back home because you're just screwing everything up. He goes, I wonder what they do. And it does pose an interesting question. What if boatloads, I mean thousands upon thousands upon thousands of American citizens descended on a place like that, and FEMA's there and they're like, hey, guys, go home. We don't want you. We don't need you. We can fix this. Like you said earlier, way cheaper and way better than you even thought of doing.
So in small towns, not and like in some, there are a lot of communities in small towns where stuff like that happens. Where on a smaller scale, obviously, when entire states are getting wiped out by a flood, it's harder to have that sort of rally. But in small communities, when like small areas are affected, like especially in in southern states, they just pile on all of like everyone helps their neighbor out. And up north in like the northern states, Minnesota there and like the Wisconsin, they're all about that. It's so neighborly in a lot of places that they help out. And I think people are just so conditioned that the government is supposed to come in and help them. It's what you're taught in school, that the government is there to help and all of this, that people have lost that sense of urgency to go do it. Because I think if the government, like if FEMA didn't exist, you would see that. Like that would happen. But because the government is there and people are like, well, I pay my taxes, so I don't, I can close my eyes and pretend the government's fixing everything. That's the mentality a lot of people have now. Versus like if a tragedy happens, you're supposed to go and see what you can do for your neighbor. But the government literally won't let you do that. It used to be, I'm from the government and I'm here to help, which was a bad sign. But now it's, I'm from the government and no one's allowed to help.
Yeah, and you're right. People have been conditioned so much to just think that, well, you don't have to worry about it because the federal, some state, local, federal agency will step in and save the day. And it's like, again, how many examples do you need to see that if help does arrive, it's late, and then it takes them forever. I mean, if you could get a bunch of private people who don't have friends in government, mind you, but I'm sure there'd be a whole boatload of contractors across the U.S. who would be willing to go down there and help rebuild and do it cheaper. But no, FEMA's going to have their buddies who will probably get a lot of these contracts because, well, it's like one of those things, well, we've verified that they're, reputable builders. And I'm like, yeah, you're verified because your best friend owns it and you said, yeah, come on in.
They have a good ESG score.
Yeah, there you go.
They're good for the environment.
The WEF has said they're good builders. Yeah, you didn't go to what's that site where you can go to and like you can get the rankings of like builders and stuff in your area.
Angie's List.
Yeah. There's no Angie's. They don't have their Angie's List is horrible. It's like a swamp list. Like, that guy looks like the creature from the Black Lagoon. I bet he'd be awesome at rebuilding the school. Give him a contract or whatever.
What's funny is like I've done contract work. Like I bought my house that I bought. When I bought it, it needed a total renovation, top to bottom, new paint, new flooring throughout the whole thing, renovated both bathrooms. And it's so easy that you just call up you get bids, you call like 3 or 4 businesses for each job you need, and you find the one that's going to be the best price at the best time that works for you. You line it out and you knock it out and get it done. I mean, I came into my house. It's a 2-bed, 2-bath ranch, flat level, and I had the whole thing renovated in a month. The whole thing, 2 beds and 2 baths with the living room and kitchen, and so it's just the amount of government waste that goes on. There's a lot of people who aren't in that kind of work and who've never contracted out their own, like never done their own like home renovation project like that. And they don't understand how simple it really is. Like someone tells you how much they're willing to do the work for, and then you find other people figure out the best one and go with that one. And so people act like, well, FEMA's they got a big job. They got to get all this material. It's not that hard. It's not that hard. There are companies that want to sell the product, and there are people that buy it. It's that easy.
Man, Voodoo Queen's making a good point here in the live stream. She said, those in the mountains didn't have flood insurance because they didn't qualify. And who the heck thinks when you live up in a mountainous area like that, you're going to have to worry about flooding to begin with?
It's weird to think about flooding on a mountain to begin with.
Yeah, to be, if you're in these mountainous areas where you're up higher in elevation, you don't ever think really about being stuck up there because of a hurricane coming through and tearing up Jake. You never even think, well, yeah, it's like a 1 in 10 billion chance. Well, I guess it is, and you just won the horrible, you just won the tragedy lottery there. Yeah, this whole thing, like I was kind of tired today, and the more I was watching videos and seeing footage and hearing these people talk, what what really hurts, what is really heartbreaking is there was a short video and it was like a preacher talking about he's like, we're out here and we really need help and the federal government's not doing much and the people need help out here and I'm like it's like I feel, I don't know what it's like to be in that situation, to go through something like that. But the thought that the first thing that comes to mind is we need the federal government to come in here. It's like, oh God, that's just that you're asking for heartbreak. I mean, your heart's already broken because your community's just been devastated. And then expecting government again to come in like they're on a white horse and, they're in a knight in suit and armor, a knight in shining armor, and they're like, we're here to, kill all the goblins or whatever. And you just get heartbroken because then they come in and screw it up too. It's like your community was devastated by a horrific storm, and now you have a horrific government agency coming in and breaking your heart on another level by screwing around and seemingly not taking it seriously and dragging their feet. And like in Jeff City here, that tornado went through however many years ago. Dude, it was a year and two later, and there were still people waiting for their roofs to be repaired. FEMA money and stuff. And it was just like a year and two later, you're still seeing blue tarps up on roofs where the shingles have been ripped off. Because I'm driving past it when I get into like the stretch of 50 going right through the middle of Jeff, and I could look down the hill and just see blue tarps everywhere. And, a year later, you're like, holy smokes, they still don't have their roofs fixed? And then, one of the local stations was talking about others people still waiting on FEMA money. Now, that's on a small scale. Now, yes, there was some damage there. Some car dealerships, like a bowling alley, got wrecked. There was a lot of milder damage, like roofs and stuff like that. Now, that's a small scale and you're waiting on FEMA. What's it going to be like for these people out there in North Carolina, Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, the Carolinas? What's their wait going to be like on that grand of a scale? That's horrifying to think about.
They ought to just not even think about the government as their option right now. I mean, again, because of how much money the government has taken from us in taxes and how much it's wasted, part of me hopes that they can find that this does have I really am hoping for like a good resolution of some form or fashion for these people. But I like you said, I'm not optimistic about the government helping these people in any sort of speedy fashion at all. If, it's going to take a very long time. Did you happen to catch did you watch the debate on Thursday? Walz and Vance?
I've tried. I don't remember the last time I watched any sort of debate. I don't know the last time that I watched them. I can't. I feel dumb enough just going through everyday life, and I just feel like I'm chancing the fact that listening to the two of those people talk is going to drag my IQ down so low that I'm going to be on disability because I'm just going to be too dumb to operate machinery, drive a car, anything. And some people can do it and live through the experience and not come out dumber. My blood pressure is going to spike because I know everything out of their mouth's pretty much a lie. So I'm just going to be sitting there getting angrier and angrier. And, honestly, because we do this show, I probably should watch. But, dude, 5-10 minutes, and that's all you're going to get out of me. And either my television's going to be broken or I'm going to have a heart attack from high blood pressure. So I'm just like, I'll just wait for the clips and then hear all the stupid people say, this guy won. Clearly he whooped the other guy's butt. And this guy looked like a fool. He was lying the whole time. It's like, they're both lying to you. Come on. You're smarter than that, aren't you?
So I guess this is good then. So from an outside, I watched it, but I watched it for two reasons, because it was the same, I believe it was the same day that Iran launched its counteroffensive. I think it was that afternoon, or it might have been the day before. Like the Israel or Iran's counterstrike might have been the day before, and that debate was the next day. So I was curious to see how both sides were going to take that. I wanted to see which one was going to out love Israel on stage, and I wasn't shocked. Both of them kind of gave a non-answer. Vance less. Obviously, the Republican's going to be a little bit more like, well, we're going to give Israel whatever they want, of course. And Walz had a little bit more of like their response needs to be appropriate, but we're still going to give them whatever they want, but it should be. And I also watched it because they said Tim Walz was going to be, they said he was nervous. People inside of his camp, it leaked out that he was like really, really nervous about this debate and didn't like his chances. So I wanted to see if he was going to crumble. And he had a really rough moment, but other than that, it wasn't, he didn't fall apart. He didn't Joe Biden it, but definitely wasn't no Kamala Harris either. Because credit to her, I didn't really watch that much of the last debate, but I went back and watched a good part of it because everyone said that she did good, and she lied the whole time. But they both did a little bit of that, but whatever.
Yeah,
So anyway, what moments did you hear about outside as like an outsider? Did you hear about any of like any big moments? Like what were the people talking about that you were seeing?
It just like the one time where Walz goes, I have a lot of friends that are school shooters, and you're like, I know he probably didn't mean that, but I saw stuff like that. There was a clip about gun laws, of course, and that's all I saw for the most part. People were really hammering, and then when Vance goes, hey, I thought we had agreement that we wouldn't be doing fact checking during the debate and all this stuff, and people were like, well, that's because he was lying and he didn't want to be fact checked. And I was talking.
So I'll tell you what I noticed because I watched that moment. So what happened was they were talking about the Haitian immigrants thing, and they did fact check him because they were trying to say that the Haitian migrants were legal immigrants. And what Vance was trying to explain, because he's like, look, if you're going to fact check, let's get the whole story. Like, let's just not tell the half truth of it, because that's what they did. What they said was a fact, is that the Haitian migrants are legal. And it also brings up another interesting point that I wanted to bring up on the show. So he said that basically when these migrants get here, they fill out a form online. It's like the CPB-1. Something, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but that's basically they just go online and fill out a form, and then they're granted legal status basically automatically. And he's saying that program was bolstered by the Harris-Walz campaign. And so obviously every leftist blew up with we fact check because he lied. But the moderators also, they're doing the half-truth thing. We're like, yeah, sure, the Haitian migrants have legal status, but did Kamala Harris make that available at the click of a button? Yes. And it also brings up another point that it's hurting the narrative of like they've changed basically it's a semantic argument now of what is legal versus illegal. So sure, these people do have legal status, but they're doing all of the things that the problem we have with illegal immigrants is. They're not vetted. They're not checked. They're taking up resources. They're getting all sort of government program help. So what's the difference?
Yeah, I know. There was a guy at work. I was talking to him yesterday, and he's like, yeah, I kind of found it funny when they fact checked, Vance and all this stuff. And I said, yeah, I get it. I said, but here's the thing. They're both lying. And I said, these people doing these debates are not unbiased. They are not a neutral party. And I said, automatically, the guy on the running on the left is going to get the favors. He's going to get he's going to have a much easier time in Vance. And I said, if they're going to do these debates and they are true debates, then there should be unbiased parties running the debate. And they're not. And I said, that's the problem. I said, they can put their little fact checks up on the screen, because he goes, yeah, there was something about the border czar, and then there's like, well, she wasn't. There's no position at the borders as there's no such position as the border czar or something like that. And I said, dude, it doesn't matter. Biden said he appointed her border czar, and I said, yeah, so it might be funny they were trying to get him on a technicality. I said, it is not okay for them to flat out just act as that never happened. I said, that's the problem. I said, yeah, it might be cute and funny. I said, but they're misleading the public, knowingly misleading the public, which we've got an understanding of that. We know that's been going on for years. But there are people who think they are getting some sort of unbiased type of fact-checking, and that's not the case. And I said, that's my problem. Yeah, it might be cute and funny when one guy or the other gets, rode on because he said something stupid. I said, but at the end of the day, both candidates are lying through their teeth. The media is helping one side. There is no unbiased. There is no non-bias. There is no drive for the truth. It is constant misleading information or flat-out lies or malinformation or disinformation or misinformation or whatever type of three-letter information you want to throw out there, whatever word. The media is complicit in covering up for one guy and trying to make the other guy look bad, like they're trying to, I don't know, it's like this good cop, bad cop routine. And so yeah, I was getting a little irritated with the dude because I'm like, why are you I get it. Yeah, they both suck. But it's not cool for the media to act and to behave in the way they're behaving right now. It is not okay. Whether those two guys are idiots, which they clearly are, and they're professional liars, that doesn't matter. I mean, it does. But in this instance, what I'm talking about right now, with the media taking part in being complicit in passing along bad information, that's not okay. That's not funny to me. It really ticks me off. I have other words to say, but this goes out on the radio, so I won't say them. But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, and I 100% agree with what you're saying. I think that the fact checking going one way is one of the harder parts of the debate. Like, it's hard to watch. Like, even as it was, because they actually lightened up after he called them out. He was like, "Look, you said you weren't going to fact check, but if we're fact checking, here we go." And then after that, they really did kind of lay off. But there was one awesome moment where they are asking. So at one point in Tim Walz's life, on top of the plurality of lies that he's told, was the fact that he was in Tiananmen Square. He claims that during the protests, he was in Tiananmen Square. And it came out later that that's just not true. He was in China. He's apparently a big fan of China. Not that that's anything to be alarmed about, but it's just the truth. He's been to China tons of times. His friends claim that his friends have said that he considers himself like a Maoist. But they were asking him about not actually being in Tiananmen Square, and he was like, I was there in the summer, and I misspoke about. And he's like, and the ABC reporter, credit to her, she was not letting it slide. She was like, no, we're saying that you said you were at the protests in Tiananmen Square. Are you now saying that you weren't? And he was like, I was there that summer and I misspoke. And he was like, I misspoke. And he had that deer in headlights look that he had all night. I'm sure you saw the picture of it.
I did see pictures of that.
Even when he was saying his own thing, not even like being asked a hard question, he'd be talking about his own point. He'd get that big face going. But no, but what do you think about the other point though, is that these immigrants have legal status now. They're not illegal immigrants. They are here legally because of the Biden-Harris administration. How do you handle that going forward?
Well, I want two things. I want to address something. I heard, and I wish I could remember where I heard it. I think it was on Clint Russell's show, Liberty Lockdown, that there were people that had college friends of his. So I guess when Walz was in college, they went to China. Reportedly, people that went from his class that went to China with him said that he was going around and trying to find every copy of the Little Red Cookbook, Mao's Little Red Book, that he could find and bring them back over the U.S. with him. Now, I haven't tried to find that information, but generally if Clint Russell's putting that on his show, Clint doesn't make stuff up. He reads these reports, and he's not trying to mislead somebody. But he's like, if that's true, that's, basically, what the heck, man? I don't know how to handle what you do because you're causing. The thing is, so let's say, for whatever reason, let's say Trump wins the election. He swears up and down he's just going to deport all these people and whatever. I don't know, right? No idea. But the thing is, there's no way, because I think, let's say he did. Let's say he comes into office, he tells ICE, if you know where these people are out they go. Send them back home to their country. I think there's enough lefty, loony, crazy lawyers who will file injunctions. They will file suit against the government saying, hey, they were given legal status. You can't kick them out now. And so what do you do then? Do you then at that time look at all those people and go, okay, yeah, that's fine. All right, you want to stay? You stay. But now, not one of you will get any sort of government welfare assistance anymore. You want money? Go get a job. And then see how many of them go, whoa, I'm out, and then they just dip out. They start fleeing, or they go to the sanctuary cities and overrun them, where the city's willing to hand them out $10,000 apiece. But some of the other cities are like, we can't afford that. You guys got to figure something out. Go get a job, do something where you can support yourself, but you're not going to get federal assistance. That's the only thing I can see. I can't see these people going anywhere, because now if I'm in a state and I had some kind of say-so or something, I would be like, oh, hey, there's a state over there that That's the problem, though. You'd have to use taxpayer money to do it. If you could just find a bunch of volunteers with like big buses and say, all right, guys, well, we're all going down to the welfare office today to get a big check. You get them all on the bus, and then the next thing you know, they're crossing the state line. They're like, how far away is this welfare office? And you go one state over that proclaims to be a, sanctuary state, and then you just go, all right, the welfare's office is over there, and they all get off the bus, and you drive away. You drive back to your state, and you're like, you just call the governor in the other state, like, oh, yeah, by the way, we just deposited like 60,000 people over there. Good luck in your sanctuary state. Click and hang up. I don't know how else to handle it. It's going to kill the taxpayer almost regardless of how because that's the thing. The government has allowed this. They don't allow the states to use their sovereign power to regulate their border in states that want to. They're like, you can't do that, and they cross and they cross and they cross and they cross. And every solution after that, even if it could be a Republican, they're going to use government money therefore they're going to use government money to get the people back out. So the taxpayers are getting fleeced by if you like New York City, $12 billion in the hole because they're just doling out money to these illegals, right? But then the taxpayer gets fleeced again in order if the feds decide, well, we're just going to start deporting these people. The people are going to get fleeced on the other side of this to pay to get all these people deported back out of the country. So they're going to get double hammered if someone actually decided to say, these people, bye. Good day to you, sir, ma'am, child. Sorry, your parents came over here illegally, but oopsie poopsie, you got to go. That's the problem. It's always going to be a government solution. The government created the problem. They're waiting for people to cry out because of the problem, which they are. And I'm not necessarily saying that's the wrong. That's not the wrong way to say, or the wrong thing to do. Yeah, necessarily. Like, what the hell are you doing? Why are you letting all these people in? But a lot of those people are going to want the government to do something about it. And then what happens? they get fleeced again, and they're not thinking about the fact that they're getting hit on both ends if somebody would come in and want to redistribute these people back home.
There's a few points I want to bring up. One is that for the bleeding heart leftists, if there's one who happens to be a fan of this show and is watching,
probably not.
There are there are billions of people, of very, very poor people in the world. I mean, it might be upwards of like 4 billion people are still at or below the world poverty line that live on like dollars a day. Or you know what I mean, a very few dollars a day, or even less than $1 a day. And the world creates hundreds of millions of people into poverty every year just by being born. Like, we add hundreds of millions of people into the poverty that go below the poverty line. So acting like Americans can immigrate our way out of poverty is absurd. So if you think that like Americans should have an open border immigration policy because it's good for the world, that's not true. In fact, the only people it's really benefiting are the people in Mexico, or that come over through Mexico, but a lot of them are Mexican and South American. That's not even the poorest parts of the world. Like, some of the people coming across have it way better than other people in other parts of the world. So then what do? Some people, their idea would be to base it off merit. So then you have merit-based immigration. The problem with that is that then you are taking the most ambitious and the smartest, most driven people from all of these other countries from the poorest parts of the world. So then they're not helping to build up their own country, and we're still neglecting the fact that we're adding hundreds of billions of people to the world below the poverty line every year. So we're never going to solve this problem through an open border immigration policy. You're not going to solve world hunger or poverty through that way. So all you're really doing is taking away the resources from the one country who sends the most amount of foreign aid to the entire world anyway. And also, there are a lot of, like, they brought it up in the debate. There's like a housing shortage in America. And J.D. Vance brought up because it's weird, because there are Americans competing with immigrants who get government money for housing. And so, yeah, there are, like, the poor people, the average American suffers. Like, if you're doing a cost-benefit analysis on deportation versus resource competition, they're saying we have a housing shortage and we've brought in millions of immigrants, like under the Biden-Harris administration. I mean, I don't know. I'm open to more argument and debate on it, but that's where I stand on it right now.
Well, and like Voodoo Queen says, they have temporary legal status. It has to be refiled every 18 months. If this, especially if Harris gets elected, they're just going to keep handing them over. They could be temporarily legal for time on end, because they clearly don't have. They're not worried about the situation at all. They're like, oh, that's fine. Yeah, just freaking let them stay. I mean, because of the probability, depending on what state that you're talking about, New York, California, maybe Illinois, where these people are allowed to vote. And they're going to gain voters, because why wouldn't someone who's given temporary legal status is allowed to carry that out longer and longer? Why wouldn't they vote for the person that's letting them do that? They're not going to vote for the other guy that's going to say, "Hey, we're ending this. We're done." They're not going to vote for that guy. And that, I wish people would figure this out, that you have a lot of people in government, especially on the Democrat side, who are willing to allow this because it's and they don't do it because they pity these people. That's the other thing that drives me insane. They don't pity these people. It's future voters. What did LBJ say? LBJ commented on this. He's the Great Society and all that. He knew that was going to get them a lot of votes for the Democrat Party. That's one of the reasons he did it. He said so. There's a quote from him. When he's talking about the black community, if you got something you want to fill in with that, I'm going to look this quote up. It is not nice what he said about the blacks when he was discussing this whole great society. It is not nice. I believe it contains the N-word. He did not think highly of black people, but he knew what was going to do.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is the media, obviously being complicit, they parrot the Democrat. For years they parroted the Democrat narrative that you were a racist if you questioned immigration policy at all. Like you were, that just means you hate other people of other races and that, this and that. But then the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, just announced that he made it's illegal for local municipalities to do voter ID laws. So all but giving away the game. That this, like you said, this whole thing was for votes. In fact, Barack Obama based his whole 2012 campaign on like the coalition. It was about bringing together people of all different races and colors, and coalescing to defeat the Republicans. And like you said.
So
something stuck in my throat.
Oh, you're good. Go
anyway,
ahead.
go on.
Well, I was going to say the let's see who actually. Okay, so basically, LBJ said, well, let's see. Hey, John Dunphy, remember when your hero LBJ commented the following after the Civil Rights Act passed, which he opposed when he was in the Senate, along with one of your heroes, Al Gore's father, who actually filibustered against its passage. I'll have them insert N-word voting Democrat for 30 years. That was what LBJ said. Oh, that's nice. Restore the tab. Yeah. I have, there's another quote. It was something about somebody's wallets, or I don't remember, but it's like, good Lord Almighty. And there's even articles. Lyndon Johnson was a civil rights hero, but also a racist. Okay, you can't have it both ways. You can't be a racist and a civil rights hero. It's just he knew that he would have them. Let's see. Lyndon Baines Johnson, 1963. These Negroes are getting pretty uppity these days, and that's a problem for us since they've got something now they never had before, the political pull to back up their uppityness. Now we've got to do something about this. We got to give them a little something, just enough to quiet them down, not enough to make a difference. I'll have them, in words, voting Democrat for the next 200 years.
Wow.
And I've heard this multiple times. I've heard people talk about this. And I've seen videos where people walk around, they're like, hey, you know who, what was it? But they're like, you know who did this? You know who, like a lot of KKK members back in the day were Democrats. The Democrat Party didn't want to end slavery. And so they're just talking to black people out on the street, and they're asking them, and they're like, no, actually, that was Republicans, or that was this. And they're like, you seem like, what? Because they've been fed the race bait leaders in their communities, the Al Sharptons and the Jesse Jacksons of the world, have them all believe that the Republicans and this certain section of people who vote a certain way or hold certain political offices are all racist. And it'll be nice maybe one day when the black communities in this country wise up and see that people like Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson use those people and race baited them the whole time to make themselves legitimate, and so they could keep popping off and running their stupid fat mouths, uttering lies at every turn. It would be nice if they would wise up and go, hey, these guys will have you dependent on government. The same government they claim to be as racist, they'll have you towing the line. They'll have you at the welfare office every month, and they won't teach you how to be independent and more sovereign and teach you what's really going on. They're race baiting you into a different form of slavery, which is government dependence. And I just hope that more and more African Americans and communities around the country will wake up and wise up to this fact that they've been lied to since the 60s.
You know what I always find interesting? It's not necessarily 100% related to what you were just saying, but you have if you go into certain communities and if you don't put money into certain communities, like if the federal government ignores certain communities, then like people consider that community abandoned. Oh, the government has abandoned us. But then if the government goes in and spends a bunch of money and then the property values go up and rent goes up in a certain area, they call it gentrification. So you literally can't win. Like if you don't put money into it, they've abandoned the people. But if you put money into it, then you've been gentrified and you're getting pushed out of your neighborhood. I don't know. The double sides, like the talking out of both sides of your mouth on that kind of argument for the left, I don't know. Always just drove me nuts.
Well, and Voodoo Queen, and let's see. Warrior Class 3 brings up something. Biden's made the same statements throughout his career. He's made derogatory, racist remarks. The media,
the racial jungle. He didn't want his kids growing up in a racial jungle.
The media doesn't say anything about it. And then Voodoo Queen says, LBJ, that he destroyed the nuclear black family. He did. They went around telling women, "Oh, you don't need a father in a home. We'll take care of you." And that started the process, because back in the late 1800s, not into the early 1900s and into before the Great Society, some of the best family bonds and the families that stuck together more often were black families. They actually did better statistically than white families before these government programs came around, where they incentivized kicking the father out of the home, and the mom knew that she was going to get a check to help take care of her family. And then building this culture of just eliminating the nuclear family. And that's the thing. Then you get the ties to high crime, horrible education, extreme amounts of poverty. And it's like it all dials back to this, a lot of it to one thing. These families were not like this before the Great Society.
And have you seen the statistics on kids who grew up without a father versus with a father?
Yeah, the amount of people of those who find themselves in prison, especially.
Yes, yeah, like you're like twice as likely to be hooked on drugs, twice as like I don't know this. I'm not going to rattle them off, but you're more likely to be addicted to drugs. You're more likely to end up in prison. You're less likely to have a college degree. Not that that really. Not that that's not just a worthless piece of paper now, but it typically means that you make more money, and so it's seen as as a societal status upgrade as having a college degree. So yeah, exactly what you just said. They destroyed the nuclear family, and so I mean they're trying to do that with everybody. It's not. I mean the government's trying to do that beyond races now. It's trying to destroy the nuclear family and make you totally government reliant, and the media is complicit too in vilifying the nuclear family in certain ways. I'm sorry, go on.
No, it's fine. It's just that, as far as what our government has put African Americans through, you had the Tuskegee experiment with the syphilis. And then, it appears from everything that I've read that the CIA allowed these people from, the freedom fighters down there in Nicaragua to bring in 2 to 4 tons of cocaine, caused a crack cocaine epidemic that just obliterated these poor areas and poor cities. And then what do we get next? Okay, well, they did that. Then they turn around with their minimum mandatory sentences. Oh, you got caught selling crack? That's 25 years. Bam. And then when those people get out of prison, guess what they're not getting? A job. Most of them are not going to find gainful employment because of the stigma attached to that criminal, that sentence that they had to serve. So there's so many levels to this. And it ties back to one. And now, again, can I put all the blame on government? Of course not. Some people just make bad choices. There's sometimes people know better. They still make the bad choice because some of these things are just, they're romanticized in music and everything. It seems like the cool thing to do. But a lot of this, the majority of these problems do stem from government programs, propaganda, and just flat out lies in the media to cover for the government and its institutions. And it just, people have got to. Now, what's cool is you do see more black entrepreneurs that are making it big, and they are going around and educating other people in black communities. Like, this is how I did it, and they're hiring predominantly black people to lift them out of poverty, and they're working across political aisles so to try to build this up. Like Ice Cube. Ice Cube is one. He invited Biden. He wanted to talk to Biden about what he's been doing as far as entrepreneurial things and educating people. And they were like, we don't want to talk to you. Now, I'm not saying this to be like, well, see, Trump's a terrific human being. You should vote for him. But Trump's like, yeah, I'll talk to you. What are you doing? And at least had, invited Ice Cube in and was like, yeah, show me what you're doing. He at least did that as being a businessman himself. Biden couldn't be bothered to talk to him. And I've heard black people say this. I've heard videos where black people are on a radio show or something, like they drag these rap artists out. Every 4 years, a rap artist come out, vote or die, and all this other stuff. The election's over. They're not calling for him anymore. They're using these rap artists to hype up the name of a certain person in a certain political party. And after the election, they don't want nothing to do with those rap artists. They don't want to hear anything from them.
I'm sure it's a favor. I'm sure they're connected I'm sure there's people in the music industry who know an agent who knows a state rep, or not a state rep, but like knows someone connected. And like, it's surprising to me when you go and look at like the different boards of companies and like the interweb of who really knows each other. One that shocked me is how many high-ranking government officials go on to be. Sorry for getting us off track, but it's funny to me how many high-ranking government officials end up becoming college, the president of a college. And so I mean, this ties back in because the government really does have like their arm in a bunch of different industries and a bunch of influence. Like, obviously, that the Pentagon has like their hand in Hollywood, so they can pump out a bunch of pro-war propaganda and anti-Russian stuff all over all of the like, anytime there's a bad guy, it's always a Russian bad guy. You think that's an accident?
Or German.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, my point being is that you're 100% right. The government totally has a hand in manipulating the narrative of the people, and they do it with the influence of people who are like actors, all of the famous people, all of the entertainment industry.
Yeah, we're talking about the CIA, or the CIA ties to the crack cocaine explosion. Warrior Class 3 brought up the reporter that exposed that supposedly killed himself. I remember watching a documentary called The Great White Hope. And there was a gentleman, as a crack cocaine dealer, he could make $1 million a week. His name was Freeway Ricky Ross. He was out of L.A. He had like 9 houses, and he treated them like drive-thrus at McDonald's. He would put a window on the side of the house, and people would just walk up, and they would slide their money through the window, and they would be given their drug, and they'd walk on. He had like 9 of these houses in L.A., but he could make $1 million in a week. The dude had money. So after his arrest, he was talking to Gary Webb. And Gary Webb talks a little bit about Freeway Ricky Ross in his book, Dark Alliance. And Brandon, if you've never read that book, mind-blowing. But, yeah, supposedly he offed himself in a bathtub in a motel room somewhere but by the time people showed up, the scene was scrubbed clean. His brother was a doctor, and his brother's like, yeah, I can't believe he slit his wrist because that man wouldn't even let me stick him with a needle to draw blood to do a normal physical exam. But he's talking to Rick Ross on the phone, and Rick Ross in this documentary said Gary Webb was freaking out. He goes, dude, I got people climbing phone poles outside my house looking in my upstairs windows. He was freaking out. They were keeping a very close eye on him because he wrote that book, and then he did a series of articles in the San Jose Mercury Sun on this very topic. And he put it all out there. Now, I don't remember. I believe it was that movie where in L.A. there was a cop or something. There was this like city meeting, and you had a former head of like the FBI or the Justice Department or something up there. You had a sitting, California U.S. Congressperson, all this stuff, and they're talking about. And this cop just stands up and goes, "Oh, by the way, some of you were trying to recruit me for Operation this, which is heavily redacted. You guys were selling cocaine and the people in that room just were like screaming and like clapping and cheering him on. He just laid it out there, and the guy, like I said, I don't remember if he's FBI or what. He was up there just kind of like mouth agape, like, oh snap! I did not expect this guy to come and run his mouth at this meeting. And he's like, listen, if you want the information, I'll give it to you. I got all the reports. I got everything just typed out, printed out. I got everything. And he's telling this congressman, you want the info? I'll give it to you. I got everything you need to know about what happened right here in L.A., especially South Central L.A. It was amazing. But yeah, Gary Webb did a phenomenal job of piecing that together. And then I believe they finally offed him for it because I wish I could remember half the stuff in that book. But you read about the people. There was one particular high-ranking dealer, and I think this was the guy that was bringing it in and then, selling it to all the dealers. Now, when the not the ATF, but the DEA whenever they're going to do a major bust, something would go out on the wire to Langley. Well, every time they'd show up to this dude's house, he had nothing. If it was little slight amounts of residue and some money, they never could bust him with all the product. And the theory is, it's a pretty sound theory, is that the CIA was telling him, hey, bro, get rid of the stuff. DEA's showing up tomorrow. So they could never catch him with anything, ever. And this guy was one of the biggest players in this whole cocaine dealing, selling program. He was one of the top guys, and they could never find him. And then I believe there were two brothers. There were like three people who finally were imprisoned, and I believe George H.W. Bush pardoned them all. And, it is crazy because when I read the book, I was just like, holy smokes, you're just sitting here, it's just packed full of info. And then I'm watching stuff, other shows like History Channel and stuff had stuff on there. Down in Miami during, like, when this cocaine and crack cocaine thing was huge, the cops would find out. They would know when a boat from, like, let's say Cuba or something would come in and dock. This one cop was like, there would be cop cars along the fence. There would be a line of cops from the cars to the boat. They would pull it off the boat. They'd throw it in the backseat of their cars. And he goes, you got these cops coming in wearing nice three-piece suits, driving Ferraris, and nobody's supposed to wonder, hey, where'd all that money come from? They were stealing the coke off the boat and then turning around, selling it, making massive amounts of money. And the thing that a lot of people don't realize is the amount of bankers who went to jail for laundering hundreds of thousands or millions of drug dollars through their banks. Oh, yeah. It was a huge thing. But people just think, and it's not hard to do. It's easy to do. people tend to focus on the drug and the dealers. But, man, those banks really helped those guys launder their money. The banks were some of the biggest criminals in that whole operation as well. So that was I mean, think about that, dude. From an intelligence agency to banks to big dealers to small-time dealers, it spread throughout that whole thing. Multiple levels of people making mint and then killing whole communities with a scourge of crack cocaine. And all the people at the top, they'll get anything. Not even a slap on the wrist. They get nothing. And we talked about it last week. Afghanistan, because some of these people they wanted to put in charge were big-time, heroin dealers, had big poppy fields, and our soldiers are guarding their poppy fields. The CIA is helping guard them. They have military troops guarding them. William Norman Grigg said it best. The CIA is the drug dealer, and the DEA is price control. And I believe he was correct on that 100%.
Yeah. It's been, it should be, if you pay attention at all, it should be common knowledge that, I've heard it a bunch of times that the CIA was heavily involved in drug dealing. And I don't know if it was the same exact story, but I heard a very, very similar story to the drug dealer who couldn't be caught because the CIA was helping him get away with it. But one thing, before we run out of time, I do want to talk about Iran. I want to talk about
for sure,
the return strike. So if you go back to my Twitter, the one that's on the one that flashes up every now and then, it's the Libertarian 4MO, and you go back to April. So Israel had committed a strike in Syria that killed the top IRGC general, and it was at the embassy in Syria. And Iran vowed to get revenge for this guy, and they were going to return a strike on Israel. And instead of using their proxy armies that they have in Hezbollah, Syria, Gaza, Yemen, they decided to launch a bunch of drones from Iran through Iraq, over Jordan, which is basically American airspace, and then into Israel's Iron Dome. And all of those drones got shot down. That morning, before Iran launched that strike, I said they were not actually aiming to hurt people. Now, I've been dealing with, I've got my new family at home, and I've been dealing with a lot, so I didn't even realize that Iran was planning a counterstrike for the death of Nasrallah, who was the Hezbollah leader. And they took him out in Iran. I'm pretty sure they took him out in Tehran. And so they vowed a return strike. And I didn't hear about it till right before it was about to happen. And I went and told everyone I knew at work, I was like, watch, not one single Israeli person is going to die from this strike. And they were like, no, this is a big deal. They're all taking cover. And I said, no, I promise you, not one single Israeli person is going to die from this strike. And the one person who died was a Palestinian who died from debris from one of those missiles getting struck down in the West Bank. And what's funny is Israel actually blew up. Their target was an air base inside of Israel, and they struck them. They struck two different air bases, killing nobody. So I don't want to hear it that Iran is out for blood. Like if you're still buying this narrative, this CIA, this establishment narrative that Iran is the terrorists and that Iran is the aggressors, this time in history should make that abundantly clear it's not true. Because if that were true, Iran would have hurt people. They would have done actual damage. But instead, they knocked out two air bases to make it harder for Israel to bomb Hezbollah. And then, not even just Hezbollah, because they're bombing Christian villages in Lebanon. They're bombing just basically indiscriminately bombing Lebanon right now. And so Lindsey Graham, in his big tirade, was talking about how we need to bomb the oil reserves in Iran. So the reason that's a terrible idea is because the Russians and the Chinese have a vetted interest in Iranian oil. I know the Russians have their own oil, but they're friends with Iran. They all trade together. They're part of BRICS. No, Brazil, Russia, India, China. No, they're not part of BRICS, but they're neighbors and they're very good friends. And China and Russia are going to defend Iranians' oil fields. So the fact, if you want to launch a strike, you are starting World War III when you launch a strike on Iranians' oil fields. Like that is a red line measure that will start World War III. And Lindsey Graham is actively pushing for it on the House floor.
Yeah, and
or in the Senate. Sorry.
How many years have they been talking this? I mean, it's been since we were in Iraq and Afghanistan. These people were chomping at the bit to attack Iran. They've been wanting it for years. So, yeah, they're going to let things escalate. They're going to let things percolate up real good and try to. Okay, so you got that, right? And then you keep hearing how the Iranians have a hit team. They're going to come after Trump. They're floating that. Now you have Israel and, some back and forth between Israel and Iran. This works out perfectly for the war hawks and the neocons. They've been wanting to go into Iran for years. Now, the problem, the people who seem to have a little bit of common sense are saying that, hey, if we think we have a big, if you think you had a hard time in Afghanistan, Iran it's impossible to go in there and win because their topography is even worse than Afghanistan's as far as the mountains and all this stuff. It will be infinitely harder to win a war in Iran. Okay? So 20 years, trillions of dollars in Afghanistan with nothing to show for it. And now you want to do this in Iran. And that's one of the other things. You want another reason why defend the guard is so important? And I know we brought this up before, but there have been states, Florida, New Orleans, other states where, they've had a hurricane come through, and they could have used their state military, National Guard, and they weren't there. They were in the Middle East. So you want another reason? Because they are already saying we're going to have to send troops to Israel. We're going to have to send troops to the Middle East because of this whole thing. So they've already almost committed to sending troops to the Middle East. And they're going to... So those troops that could possibly help search and rescue or whatever, they got to be on standby and go and send them off into another war, unnecessary, escalatory type of battle or whatever. And we've got problems right here at home. But nope, they'll let people be trapped on a mountaintop or waiting months and months or weeks and weeks for help. But we can sure as heck send troops over to the Middle East and possibly get a bunch of American soldiers killed. No problem. Who cares? That's just freaking mind-blowing. But that's another reason, people, if you have any faith in your government, that should wipe it all away right there.
So I also want people to understand that there is a difference between Hezbollah and the Lebanese army. And so Israel has been bombing what they claim to be, and it's not true. It's mostly citizens, but they're bombing what they claim to be Hezbollah targets. I'm sure they're killing a couple Hezbollah targets, but most of the bombing is killing civilians. And then they started a ground invasion of Lebanon. Like, they're in Lebanese territory. And the Lebanese army, which is not Hezbollah, it is the official governing army, like the army of the government of Lebanon, is actively fighting the Israelis right now. So they've started another conflict. Like, they're not even at a war with the same people they were in Lebanon a week ago. They actually have started a new conflict with a new group. And like I said a minute ago, and I guess I kind of brushed over it, but they actually are killing Christians. They've wiped out entire Christian families in Lebanon indiscriminately, because like I said, they don't care who they're bombing. They're just bombing that entire area. And it's disgusting. It's sad that, like, the American people and the narrative is still that, like, those groups are the terrorists and Iran and Israel is the good guys. From what I've seen even if you include October 7th, then both sides are bad guys. And I'm not arguing that the leaders on both sides are not bad guys. They probably are. I've said this before. The leaders of most armies and nations are bad guys. But we can't be giving all of our money, especially like you said, we've got people stranded on mountains in America. We don't need to be sending billions of dollars overseas anymore to draw ourselves closer into World War III. I don't know if you can pull it up, but I just sent you a video on X, on a message. It's got this video of Donald Trump, and I just want to, if you can, I wanted you to play it because it's if people think Donald Trump is going to come in and stop World War III, I think they're mistaken, by far, because he is in the pocket of the Israeli lobby, and they want to blow up Iran. And if you attack Iran, you're going to start a fight with Russia and China. You're going to do it. It's going to happen. It might be a proxy war for a short period of time, but eventually it's going to be boots on the ground. I'm telling you, you can't attack the Iranian oil fields. It's one of the craziest things I've heard this in a very long time.
Yeah, I've got it right here. Let me start it over, and I'll ensure that. Yep, there we go. Let me drag this back. Hopefully, it's not super loud, but let me play this. Come on.
If I were president and a former president and a leading candidate, I'm the leading candidate by far to be the next president. And that leading candidate was under threat. If I was president and the candidate was under threat, any candidate, Republican or Democrat, and by the way, I want to thank the Democrats because they just increased funding for the Secret Service, who work very hard. They increased funding for the Secret Service, and nobody will believe this. It was a unanimous vote. Republicans, every single Republican, every single Democrat present voted in favor. That was the first unanimous vote we've seen in a long time, and that's to increase the funding of the Secret Service. So I thank everybody in Congress. But if I were the president, I would inform the threatening country, in this case Iran, that if you do anything to harm this person, we are going to blow your largest cities and the country itself to smithereens. We're going to blow it to smithereens. You can't do that. And there would be no more threats. There would be no more threats. If I were...
Yeah.
Did I send you the wrong clip? I think I may have sent you the wrong clip. Was he talking about Israel there?
Yeah, well, he was talking about if they threatened a candidate that he would blow them up.
That was the wrong one. I'm sorry. The one I meant to send you was basically he's on this tangent for like a couple minutes where he's like, Sheldon Adelson and Miriam Adelson, they used to be at the White House more than my aides. They were at the White House more than anybody. They're coming in. They're asking me for favors. I'm doing them all these favors. At one point, I had to tell them, I can't do you any more favors for 2 weeks. And it just blows my mind because he's openly admitting that our foreign policy is for sale and that Israel has bought him out. Because none of what he says is that he's doing it for the national interest. He said Sheldon Adelson showed up at the White House more than people that worked at the White House. And I was doing him all kinds of favors. And what are those favors? It's moving the American embassy to Jerusalem. It's giving Israel the Golan Heights, which is contested territory. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I have heard that clip of him bragging about it, and it's like, wow. That's the thing that, the Trump cultists and the Harris and Biden cultists, they can't come to grips with the fact that both parties have been captured by the military-industrial complex, the AIPAC, all these lobbyist groups, they cannot admit that they've been captured by these groups, and that they have the majority of both political parties ready and willing to just dole out billions of dollars in aid. And then, therefore, they can turn around with the very weapons that have been sold to them and turn around and sell those weapons to other countries and make billions of dollars. And it's really frustrating to see people in these cults in both parties who cannot accept the truth, who cannot accept the fact that we are not supposed to be the policemen of the world, that we are not supposed to stick our nose in other countries' business. We are not supposed to be removing leaders and to put people in power who are more friendly to the United States. Or it generally, again, if you read the book, oh God, now I'm blanking out here. But it's basically written by a guy who used to work for the World Bank and laid out that how we would go into a country and offer them a loan. If they wouldn't take the loan, well, we'll kick you out and we'll put someone in place who will take the loan. And now the interest rates and such are that you will never get out of that debt. And in fact, you will allow companies from our country to come in and get the oil. Now, oh, sure, we'll build you, we'll help you with your electric grid, but you're going to have to let our oil companies come in and drill for oil. You won't see any of that money. And it's just a Ponzi scheme. And, all these things happen. And they just can't accept. Well, of course, now the media is not going to talk about this, but a little bit of research, you can find it. I mean, it's not hard. That book is not a super long book. Confessions of an Economic Hitman. That's what it is. That's the name of the book. Now, towards the end of that book, he gets into some new agey stuff, and I just quit reading it there. But the 80% of that book, it's well documented on several South America, the Middle East. I mean, there's been, you had the Banana Republic. You've had all these instances. Ron Paul famously spoke about how we deposed the Shah in Iran, and what happened after that. They took hostages, and it caused the whole thing. And he's, famously talked about that during debates. And then it was funny, after one debate, he's sitting there talking to Sean Hannity, and Sean Hannity's like, and Ron Paul looks at him and goes, maybe you should read more about what the CIA wrote about blowback. Maybe because Hannity's like, I think you're, blah, 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 blah. And Ron Paul just looks at him and goes, you need to read more history because this is factual. Just read it. It's written in black and white, dude. Do your freaking job. Of course, Hannity was a cuck for George Bush and Mitt Romney and whoever the leader was at that time. That worked out real slick for us. But, everybody that loves liberty just needs to go out and buy the T-shirt that said Ron Paul was right. Because he's constantly right. Even to this day on his podcast, he's constantly right. He can telegraph exactly what's going to happen. He can't telegraph exactly when, but everything Ron Paul talked about on the floor as a sitting congressman came to pass all the time.
Yeah. The modern day Ron Paul is Thomas Massey.
Yes.
He does it once a week. I don't know if you were. I don't remember if we were talking about this on this show, but he, when they were talking about Russia, Ukraine, he was asking. He was in a big cabinet meeting, and he was asking everybody. He's like, they were talking about how many Russians have been killed in this war and all this, and he goes, "How many Ukrainians have died?" And the guy starts repeating all of the facts about how many Russians have been killed. He's like, "No, that's not what I asked. I asked how many Ukrainian soldiers have been killed," and no one could give him that answer. So then, when they were getting ready to give more money to Ukraine on the House floor, Massey went to Mike Johnson, the speaker, and he was like, he's like, I heard we're going to give more money to Ukraine. He's like, yeah. He's like, do you know how many Ukrainians have died in that war? And he starts doing the same thing all the CIA puppets were doing. He starts repeating all of the facts about how many Russians had been killed. He's like, that's not what I asked you. I asked you how many Ukrainian soldiers have died. And Mike Johnson was getting ready to give more money to Ukraine, has not even asked the question of how many conscripted Ukrainian soldiers have died in that war. I mean, like you said, the interests of the elites are not of the people in our country or any country. They're all for themselves. They're all to keep power and to make more money for them and their friends. It's absolutely disgusting. If you wanted to play it, I sent you the right clip this time.
Okay.
But
well, Warrior Class 3, it's hard to. Some people, it's hard to say this, but it's true. He said, perhaps we need iron-fisted tyranny before the people will finally fight back, and that he's not wrong.
I mean, I guess, but it seems like it doesn't matter how much tyranny. Like, how much tyranny do you need? What if they locked you in your house, told you couldn't leave? What if they told you couldn't go to the park? What if they forced you to take their vaccines? Like, how much tyranny? How much tyranny before the people revolt?
Just as I promised,
shut up. Shut up, Trump. Let me pull up this clip, Trump, before you open your big fat trap. Let me start from the beginning, and we'll listen to here he is. Got a big banner behind him, Israeli-American Council. Let me play this clip.
Just as I promised, I recognized Israel's eternal capital and opened the American embassy in Jerusalem. Jerusalem became the capital. I also recognized Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights. You know, Miriam and Sheldon would come into the White House probably almost more than anybody outside of people that work there. And they were always after, and as soon as I'd give them something, always for Israel. As soon as I'd give them something, they'd want something else. I said, give me a couple of weeks, will you please? But I gave them the Golan Heights, and they never even asked for it. You know, for 72 years, they've been trying to do the Golan Heights, right? And even Sheldon didn't have the nerve. But I said, you know what? I said to David Friedman, give me a quick lesson, like 5 minutes or less on the Golan Heights. And he did. And I said, let's do it. We got it done in about 15 minutes, right?
Yeah, I'm not...
Isn't that just absolutely disgusting? Like, how do Republicans listen to talk like that and just go, no, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, he took a bunch of donor money and then he's doing a bunch of favors for a foreign government. Checks out. Isn't that what everyone was up in arms about what Biden was doing? They were taking money from the Chinese government and facilitating favors. How is that different? I mean, everybody knows Jared Kushner's well connected with the Jewish community. I mean, he's for sure behind a lot of this, I'm certain. So I just don't understand why Republicans turn a blind eye to that. Blows my mind.
You know, it's that thing. It's cheerleading their team. That's the only way to look at it, is just cheerleading their team. It doesn't matter how badly they're getting screwed over by taxation or what. As long as their team is doing it, then it's okay. And that's just, you know, this my country right or wrong type of mentality, and just overlooking, you know, again, I made a TikTok video this morning because I followed up with the one I had done the morning before, saying, where in the heck are anti-war candidates? There doesn't seem to be many anti-war candidates, many anti-war people in government. And, you know, somebody's like, are you going to back up your, you know, your rant with facts? And so I made a follow-up video this morning, like, okay, fine. Lindsey Graham, Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, George Bush, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, the list goes on. I shouldn't even have to do this. It is blatantly obvious the amount of people that are fine with continual war. Like, I have to sit here and do this. I have to name names. You can't do this on your own. And I get a comment like, everybody loves war. It's been going on. Like, everybody loves war? We all love war? And the wars continue? Really? That's what one person commented. I'm like, I'm not even going to entertain answering that or responding to that comment. I'm literally sitting here and saying I'm anti-war. Again, I shouldn't even have to say this. I'm not saying that if we were genuinely attacked by another nation, i.e. 9/11, yeah, you go turn them to glass. You go nail the people responsible for the attack, and it's done. We didn't do that. We spent 20 years toying around creating more enemies. I'm not saying that if we're attacked, you don't answer that attack with an attack of your own. What I'm saying is we don't go around looking for people to blow up, and we don't go around the world creating more enemies to hate us causing blowback. That's what I'm saying. We don't have to do that.
You can't bomb a bunch of innocent women and children and call it self-defense.
No, you
That's
cannot.
that is what America did in 2001, 2003, all throughout the 2010s. And it's what Israel's doing right now, and it's going to cost them for generations to come. If they think that they can just annihilate the entire Muslim population off the face of the earth in the Middle East, they're wrong. And as long as there's a Muslim population, they're going to be very upset at Israel for years and years and years to come. I mean, madder than they've already been. I mean, it would take a massive overhaul of the Israeli government and then peace deals to start breaking out everywhere before you could even consider forgiving what the Israeli people have done to their surrounding neighbors. Anyway, before we run out of time, really quick, I just wanted to note that coming up on Monday is October 7th, and I'm personally selling Israeli pandering barf bags. So if you get too sick of all of your politicians on Twitter talking about how October 7th was the worst thing in history and how there literally is no unwarranted response, you can get a barf bag from me on my Twitter handle.
It should have Ben Shapiro's face on it too. Should put Ben Shapiro's face on it, so you can vomit directly on. Like, you wouldn't be vomiting directly on to Ben Shapiro, but you would be vomiting on Ben Shapiro. So yeah, you should put Ben Shapiro's face, because he's been, he's one of the worst for saying that type of stuff. Like, no response is too harsh for what's happening. He literally just ignores.
What's funny is
so many things.
That's what they say the problem is with Hamas's thinking. Like, they're like, well, that's because those people are savages. They'll do anything in response. But then you have the nerve to say literally any response. There is no such thing as an unwarranted response at this point. I'm like, do you not see how this is the cycle of escalation? That one side does something and the other side says, well, there's nothing that's off limits now. So then the other side says, well, there's nothing off limits now. And here we go. And then here we have it.
Just a vicious cycle of people attacking each other and causing harm to innocent civilians on both sides, therefore emboldening their enemy, causing more hatred, more violence. And then, but again, Netanyahu said, I control the flame when talking about Hamas. I control the height of the flame. He said that in public. It's been published in newspapers in Israel. I control the height of the flame. And then we have to pretend that he's not emboldening the enemy by killing thousands of innocent civilians. We've done it. Israel does it. Terrorists do it. And they just embolden the other side. And there's a whole lot of people in the middle that would just like to go, can we just stop the violence? But again, when we continue to go over there, shove our nose in, and act on an attack and say, well, we have to stand up for this population and this within these borders, we have to go stand up for them. Too many American people like, yeah, go blow up the brown people. Okay, and you expect that they won't return the favor in some way? In some instance, they're not going to return the favor. They're not going to come back and say, oh, you think that was cool? Well, hold my beer and watch this. And
yeah, but I just want to note again for the people who missed it, Iran has responded to Israel's actions twice this year, and both times they killed 0 Israeli civilians. So if you're going to hear the narrative all week, because October 7th is coming up in 3 days, you're going to hear it all week about how Iran needs to be wiped off the face of the earth. They've killed 0 Israeli civilians this year.
Yeah, it is just astounding, and until the American people wake up and stand together for their government and peace, and to their government, and say, hey, for once, how about you don't? How about you don't? I wish I could pull up the Austin Powers movie with Dr. Evil, and he's always bantering at Scotty. Scotty don't. Scotty don't. I wish it'd be like, Fed don't. Yeah. Got the pinky to the corner of his mouth. And he's like, I don't remember. I wish I could pull it up and there not be language in it where he's like, he's like, Scotty don't. You know, it's just like that's what we need. We need millions and millions of Americans going, Scotty don't. You know, just feds don't. That's what we need. We need the people in this country to finally just band together, even if we don't agree on 75% of everything else. You just go, hey, feds, stop blowing up people and making us vulnerable. I'm not saying that we have this mass invasion, but we can't also sit here and act like there's no repercussions to their actions. All right, folks, that's going to do it for this week's edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. To those of you in podcast land, radio land, those of you on YouTube and Rumble, we greatly appreciate your continued viewership, listenership, and support. And again, next Friday, I will not be doing a live stream. I'm trying to make up my mind whether I'm just going to take a week off and take it easy, or if we're going to do a show earlier in the week. There will be some announcements made on Facebook and X, so stay tuned for that. If I do decide if we decide to do a show earlier in the week, we will make those announcements. So be on the lookout for that. But again, thanks everyone. We'll see you next week right here on the Missouri Liberty Report.
I'll be right